In day-to-day life, people delete things, but I do not recall deleting any phone calls.
Who sits there and deletes call logs? Unless you don't want people to know that phone calls have been made.
To specifically say, the guy never came in the house. The guy, by the way, being John O'Keefe.
First of all, what's with the coughing? Why would you need to create a timeline to remember everything that had happened unless it was fabricated? Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to your favorite show on the internet, Raw Law Unfiltered, with your favorite host of all time, the DUI guy. Plus today, you're going to get a chance to see Jennifer the Puppet Master McCabe get absolutely dissected. Open heart surgery in open court. Watch how Alan Jackson goes text message by text message unbelievably well. Just absolutely slaughters Jennifer McCabe right there on that witness stand, gets her to admit some of the most crucial evidence that is required for Karen Reed's defense. And listen to her answers, because she refuses to admit most of this stuff, but it doesn't matter. What really matters are Alan Jackson's questions. The questions is where the testimony really is.
May I inquire, Your Honor?
Yes.
The fact of the matter is, according to those Celebrite records and that extraction from your own phone, every one of the calls that you made to John O'Keefe's phone between 12:29 and between 12:14 and 12:50 a.m. was deleted and unrecovered, correct?
I didn't understand that report, and I'm not an expert.
When you compare the two,
Notice how she's trying to play dumb. Like, they were deleted. I didn't understand that report, and I'm not an expert. But the minute, I imagine, he asks her, did you delete those messages? Let me not put words in her mouth. Let's see what she says.
you saw a bunch of calls on John O'Keefe's phone, right? You know he couldn't have deleted them. He passed away, right?
Correct.
You saw your cell phone extraction, which is the handshake for John O'Keefe's phone. And all of your calls are missing, right?
Objection.
Can you answer that question?
I'm confused. That paper, I don't understand it. It was vague. There were numbers. There were calls everywhere. There was a number of missing calls.
There's a bunch of missing calls, right? You didn't see any of the calls that were reflected on John O'Keefe's phone. Is that right? Yes or no? They're not there.
A lot of calls are missing. I'm not really even sure what's there because the numbers are it's all redacted.
So you were not seeing any redacted calls, Ms.
The page you just had in front of me was redacted.
It's now an exhibit.
It's now an exhibit. Your personal information was redacted. None of the calls were redacted now.
The numbers, I don't know people's phone numbers. I just have them as contacts.
Ms. McCabe, you just said a second ago, and we can do this all day long, or we can just make it simple. The fact of the matter is that report.
By the way, just notice how he's like, look, ma'am, we can go back and forth all day long. If you just want to answer my questions simply yes or no, you're going to get out of here a lot faster. He's literally giving her an opportunity to at least do right, just for this once. I know it's not easy for a woman like that to do right, but try.
It did not show any of the calls that John O'Keefe's phone report showed, correct? From 12:14 to 12:50.
I believe there was one on there.
5:52. That's the next morning, ma'am. Right?
Were there other calls in that time period on the Celebrate?
You just said there weren't. You just looked at them.
I've told you that Celebrate report was extremely hard to read.
Right. Fact is, there are no calls on your own phone extraction between you and John O'Keefe between 12:14 and 12:50. Would you just agree with that, at least on that report?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
I mean, it's a
The
valid
fact
question,
is
because she
that
keeps
you
resisting.
deleted your call records before you.
Listen, right here.
The fact is that you deleted your call records before you turned your phone in, didn't you, Ms. McCabe? That's what that report shows.
Absolutely not.
You sanitized your phone because you didn't want the police to know who you had been calling or the fact that you had been calling John O'Keefe's phone incessantly, correct?
Incorrect. I willingly turned over my phone.
After you deleted your phone call logs, correct?
Absolutely not.
What date did you turn your phone over?
possibly February 3rd.
How many days after this incident was that?
4, 5.
So you had plenty of time to talk to that friends and family group and ultimately decide to delete your phone calls, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
The jury heard it, and that's what matters.
Group chats with family members who are witnesses in this case.
Yes.
May I approach you on?
Yes.
Flip through those.
Those are the group texts that the FBI extracted from Jennifer McCabe's phone. That's why they're blue and green like that.
While Mr. Lally is looking through that packet, can I just ask to make sure the record is clear? Did you delete any of your calls before you turned your phone into law enforcement?
I spoke with the 2 officers that I handed my phone over to, and I asked if I could delete the personal conversations with my daughters. And they said absolutely yes, that I could.
So other than calls with your daughters that you
What?
deleted, did you delete any other calls on your phone at all? Mr.
There were
McCabe?
text messages. It was actually text messages with my daughters that I deleted, and that was all I deleted.
Did you delete any phone calls?
I do not recall deleting any phone calls at all. I would have no reason to delete anything.
So that's very different than I didn't delete any phone calls.
That's right.
I do not remember deleting phone calls means you might have.
In day-to-day life, people delete things, but I do not recall deleting any phone calls.
In the day-to-day life, people delete phone calls? Look, I'm not a mastermind criminal, as much as I'm sure a lot of people would like to pin that on me at some point. Good luck. I run a clean ship. I don't recall a single time within recent memory, unless maybe there were even spam. Actually, even spam, I just ignore. I don't delete spam from call logs. Who sits there and deletes call logs? Unless you don't want people to know that phone calls have been made. Show of hands in the comments below, folks. Tell me, how many of you delete your call logs on a regular basis? I'm curious, and maybe I'm the only one who doesn't. Maybe I'm unique. I don't understand. Who deletes their call logs? This is so bizarre.
In day-to-day life, did you delete any of the calls to John O'Keefe?
No,
Did you delete any of your calls with Nicole Albert?
no,
Did you delete any of your calls with Brian Albert?
no,
With Chris Albert?
no,
With Julie Albert?
no,
Colin Albert?
no,
With any of the witnesses in this case, did you delete any calls before you turned that phone over?
no, no.
May I approach that?
Yes.
Ms. McCabe, I'm handing you a packet of documents.
She thinks she's
Appears to be
slick.
about 10 pages long. Do you recognize what's in those documents?
Yes,
You
But she's
indicated
not slick
already
at
that you were
all.
part of a group chat with certain members of your family and friends.
correct.
Did that group chat, I'm most interested in the group chat between yourself, Nicole Albert, Brian Albert, Matt McCabe, on or around, that group chat starting on or around February 1st, 2022.
Okay.
Does that look like a true and accurate reflection of the text messages between, or certain of the text messages between and among that group?
Yes, the ones I've seen, yes.
On February
Can you just
1st
tell me what page you're on? I'm sorry.
Of course, Your Honor.
The Bates stamp number?
2148.
Okay,
is where
thank
I'm
you.
going to start.
Thank you.
And they should go relatively chronologically, Your Honor, page by
Okay.
page. On February 1st, 2022, around 2:15 in the afternoon, on this group chat, did you receive a message from your husband on the group? This is on page 2148,
Here come the text messages.
and it should be the middle bubble.
By the way, if you have not seen the video of Matthew McCabe getting pulverized by Alan Jackson, it may have been David Yannetti. I honestly don't remember at this point. I did a video on that as well. Oh, it was glorious. You should definitely go check that out. He was cross-examined on those questions in there as well, and it was beautiful. You do not want to miss that one.
The middle and the bottom bubble. Quote, Julie said channel 4 is in DE. You see that?
Yes.
And the response from Matt McCabe is eating, I assume, quote, ask Chris to ask some questions. Tell them the guy never went in the house, end quote. You see that?
Yes.
You look at the next page, the top.
Tell them the guy, John O'Keefe, may he rest in peace. Tell him to tell them the guy never went in the house. Make sure that the police are aware that we have a scheme going on. That scheme requires for John never having entered the home. Something happened to him outside. We were not involved. If that's what happened, you don't have to tell anybody to tell the police John O'Keefe never went in the house. You simply say, tell him the truth. Tell him what happened. The fact that you have to specify the most important piece of your entire scheme and you have it in writing, first of all, you're an idiot and you're not very good at committing crimes, so don't do it. And number two, goes to show that you were involved. Simple as that, folks.
149. There's a one-word answer from Brian Albert. What is that answer?
Exactly.
Does it appear to you from this?
And by the way, that was a smart move by Jennifer McCabe. Don't even try to argue with it. She already watched Matthew McCabe's testimony. She's not supposed to, but we all know she's watched all the testimony up until this point, so she can be as perfectly prepared as she possibly could be. And she knew this question was going to be coming, and she knew what her answer is going to have to be. She's going to have to admit it. So she said, oh, yeah, absolutely, exactly. Yeah, that's how everybody talks. And it actually makes her look even more of a criminal than she already was. There's no way out for these people. If you try to fight, you look guilty. If you try to resist, you look guilty. If you just give it up so easily and confidently, you look guilty. There's just no way out. Don't commit murder, folks, and then you don't have to be in the hot seat like Miss Jennifer McCabe. I feel really bad for John O'Keefe's family. And having to sit through all of this.
Chat that Matt McCabe was directing witnesses, specifically Chris Albert, what to say to the news media.
Objection.
I'll allow that. Is that what you're seeing?
That is not how I would understand this.
He never went in that. Tell them he never went in the house was the story that had been concocted between and among this group of people on this chat, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
No. John never went in the house. It wasn't a story. It was the truth. And it is the truth.
Just like she said, I hit him.
Correct.
So combative.
So according to this chat, at least,
Remember, her answers are irrelevant. Her answers do not matter. Alan Jackson is the one testifying for the jury to listen to his story and explanation as to how Karen Reed had zero involvement, and it was all these people who have concocted the murder and cover-up, the Canton cover-up of the murder of John O'Keefe.
base level. This is one witness telling another witness to give certain information to the media that could be useful to the group, correct? Tell them the guy never went in the house, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Matt McCabe
Jury
was
heard it.
directing Chris Albert. Chris Albert wasn't even at the house, was he?
Chris Albert was not at the house, no.
But this chat is Matt McCabe, your husband, telling Chris Albert, who was never at the house and would have no personal knowledge of what happened at the house, to specifically say, the guy never came in the house. The guy, by the way, being John O'Keefe. Right?
That's what he wrote.
She knows
Does that
it's
sound to you a little bit like collusion?
Objection.
Sustained.
again. And by the way, what's with all the coughing? Let me rewind 5 seconds. Does that sound like collusion? Listen to the coughs. and how she's paying attention to the coughs.
Sustained.
A little bit like collusion.
Objection.
Sustained.
At some point,
First of all, what's with the coughing? And second, again, her answer is irrelevant. The objection is irrelevant. It sounds like collusion, and the jury believes it. It's what makes sense. It's the simplest, Occam's razor, the simplest way to the truth. If it sounds like it could be true, it probably is. Shortest path to victory. Shortest path to understanding what happened. Occam's razor.
you sought out Carrie Roberts' cell phone number shortly after the 29th, or maybe not, maybe on the 29th, correct?
Correct.
You didn't have her cell number in your phone?
No.
One of your primary concerns was to make sure that you got in contact with Carrie Roberts before the day's end, right?
I wanted to speak to Carrie as she was on her way to the hospital, and I wanted to check in on John.
One of your primary concerns, Ms. McCabe, was that you wanted to make sure you got a hold of Carrie Roberts and had communication with her before the end of the day.
It had nothing to do with getting in touch with her by the end of the day. It was a friend reaching out, wondering how her friend was doing, who was just taken off the front lawn.
On the 29th.
Yes.
So before the end of the day, Ms. McCabe, you can do this all day long. Before the end of the day, you were trying to get a hold of Carrie Roberts, correct?
Immediately in the morning, I wanted to get in touch with her.
Right. So you sought out her phone number. First you tried my client, Karen Reed, correct?
Correct.
But then you found another source for that information. Is that right?
Correct.
And you said just a second ago you were claimed that you needed that information because you knew that she was on the way to see John O'Keefe's parents,
She was picking them up.
and you wanted to check on them.
Correct.
But the reality of the situation, Ms. McCabe, is that you wanted a pulse check on every single element of this case because you wanted to maintain your control just like you do with every situation involving this case from January 29th all the way to the date of her testimony, which was at the end of May. And now the jury sees that.
You've been friends with the O'Keefe family for years, haven't you?
Correct.
So you didn't have a need to get Carrie Roberts' phone number, did you?
I wanted to speak with Carrie, see how she was doing. I was not going to call Peg.
You had her phone number, didn't you?
I do, yes.
So if you wanted to check on somebody, you could have just called her.
I was not going to call Peg O'Keefe on the way to see her son at the hospital.
To check on your friend? That was just too much.
I wanted to ask Carrie. I'm sure she was boggled down and probably did not want to speak with anyone. It was a simple thing.
And by the way, can somebody please explain to me why is this woman not having a single bit of emotion, even though she's talking about like very emotional things like, I wanted to check in on my friend. Like somebody testifying would be like, I wanted to check in on my friend. You know, I was worried about her. I wanted to know how she's doing. This woman is like, I wanted to check in on my friend. I wanted to make sure that she is okay. Has she ever looked in the mirror at how she looks when she's talking about people's feelings? Does she know what feelings are? Has she ever felt anything in her life? I wonder. I can't help but wonder. What do you think, folks? Let me know in the comments below.
I made sure I got Carrie Roberts' number so I could check in and see how John was doing. Also, we had just been through an extremely traumatic event together.
There it is again.
There's nothing evil here.
Carrie Roberts' number.
Again, somebody who's not doing anything evil doesn't have to say there is nothing evil here and shake her head like this. I mean, folks, it's almost too easy. It's almost too easy.
Ms. McCabe, is because you wanted to make sure that you controlled her story as she left your site, correct?
Absolutely not.
Did you take any steps whatsoever, to influence Carrie Roberts' statements?
No.
Because that would be collusion, wouldn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
They heard it.
Did you write a text to the group, including Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and Matt McCabe, where you informed them that, quote, and this is, Your Honor, on page 2158, where you informed them, quote, Carrie is here going over timeline, end quote.
Correct.
So you reported back to Brian, Nicole, and Matt that Carrie was where?
She came over my house.
And you two sat down and went over a, quote, timeline together.
Peggy spoke to Carrie.
Yes or no? I didn't ask about Peggy.
Well, that's where the timeline started at.
Did you ask Carrie, or did Carrie show up at your house and, quote unquote, go over a timeline with you?
Carrie showed up asking to sit down with me to do a timeline so we would remember everything that had happened.
And you
Why would you need to create a timeline to remember everything that had happened unless it was fabricated, unless it was weaved, unless it was lies? Because if it's the truth, you don't need to sit down and create a timeline. When was the last time you were telling your friend a story and you're like, okay, sit down, let's create a timeline together so I can show you what happened, or we can recreate together what had happened? I think I just had a Freudian slip there. It's only when you need to recreate the story, that's when you have a timeline. If it's the truth, if you're telling the truth, you don't need to create a timeline for it. They wanted to create a timeline to make sure that everybody was on the same page. Because if their testimony is not going to stick at the grand jury hearing, then they're cooked. And Karen Reed would have never been prosecuted for murder, falsely.
You wanted to be super helpful about that, right?
Objection, Your Honor.
Ask it differently.
Sure. You wanted to be helpful to Carrie Roberts.
The two of us were trying to figure out what had happened to our friend.
And so you made sure that you created and drafted with Carrie Roberts a timeline for her, correct?
I didn't make sure of anything. She was the one that asked me to do it.
And not only did you create a timeline, you then reported back to your group, Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, Matt McCabe, that she was creating this timeline with you on February 1st, 2022. Isn't that right?
Yes.
After you created or drafted this timeline with Carrie,
Drafted this timeline. I love Alan Jackson. I love him so much.
she actually sat for an interview with the police, did she not? That's not in the chats. I'm just asking. She sat down for an interview with the police, didn't she?
When?
You tell me. It's my question.
I'm not sure of when you're talking about.
Okay, let's start over.
Yes.
After this timeline was created,
And what's with the deer in the headlights look like? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know where you are. Tell me so I can make sure that I access that fabricated file in my head. That deer in the headlights, it's the mortified, terrified, scared look of like somebody who's just making sure they get everything just the way that they're supposed to. That is not the hallmark of someone telling the truth.
created on February 1st. At some point thereafter, Carrie Roberts conducted a formal interview with the police about this case, correct?
Do you have the report of that date?
We're sort of bearing the lead. She did the interview in your living room, ma'am. Right?
There was, on Tuesday, 2 officers came to the house and she sat in the other room and spoke with them.
So, using my question, she did the interview at your house.
Oh, they came to my house to interview me, and she happened to be there, so they asked if they could speak with her also.
Okay. Did she or did she not do an interview at your house?
Did, yes.
There you
That wasn't
go.
that hard.
See, was that so hard? Just yes or no. Did she do the interview at your house? Well, on January... No. Did she do the interview at your house? Well, she was invited and she was there. Listen, was she interviewed at your house? Yes or no? Yes, thank you. Moving on. Was that so hard?
You were present for that interview, weren't you?
I was eating dinner.
You were present for the interview, Miss McCabe,
I was in the house, yes.
and you listened to that interview, didn't you?
No, I did not.
You made sure you gave Carrie Roberts
Checking the pulse on the jury. No, I did not. Are they buying it?
everything she needed for that interview, correct? Quote, everything she might need for that interview, didn't you?
And where is this that you're quoting
I was
from?
asking you.
Oh, I'm sorry. when you quoted, I thought it was in here. I apologize.
We'll get to it in a second. Did you tell her everything that you wanted her to say?
No, I did not.
Did you in any way attempt to influence her testimony before she gave that interview in your living room?
Absolutely not. Carrie is her own person.
But then you did report her progress to the Albert and McCabe group in that group chat, didn't you?
Can you show me where, please?
Sure. Isn't it true that in a group text with Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, Matt McCabe, you wrote, and this is on page 2159, quote, and we handed handed phone to Carrie. You remember that?
I see that, yes.
And the very next text is from you telling the group she's telling him everything in all caps, 2 exclamation points.
Yes.
And then you went on to say at 2:55 p.m., at basically the same moment, quote, all this stuff, end quote. Correct?
Correct.
So when you said a couple of minutes ago that you weren't listening to what she was saying, that was a lie, wasn't it?
We're talking about 2 different interviews. I'm talking about when the officers came to my house and spoke to her there. You're saying that I handed the phone over, so that would be a different interview.
She has an answer for everything, doesn't she? No, that's a different interview. I listened in on a completely different interview. Those are not connected, sir. She looks like a moron, and she doesn't even know it. Or maybe she does, and that's the best she's got. I hope it's the latter. It would make her look at least as good as it can, you know what I mean?
Okay, this is on February 1st at 2:55. I wasn't there. You were there. She was in your house on February 1st giving an interview to the police, wasn't she?
One day she was there giving an interview to the police.
And while she was there,
But I do not believe it was at 2:55. It was later in the evening, so I think you might have 2 events confused.
so either way, whether she was on the phone with the police or sitting there in your living room with the police, you were listening to her and reporting back to the group, she's telling them everything.
No, it's not correct. The one that she did with the police, she did in the other room. And the one she did on the phone, I said, she's telling them everything.
I know.
Because
I know.
Carrie is an extremely blunt person, and she was giving personal feelings about the situation. And I was horrified by it.
To the police.
To the police.
And you're
How is that any of your business? Why do you care? Oh, that's right, you're the puppet master in control of the narrative. Silly me, I completely forgot.
listening in on a police interview, correct?
It was a phone call.
One side of it, right?
It was a phone call.
You're listening in on a police interview, one side of it, correct?
Correct.
You're eavesdropping on that interview, correct?
I'm sitting with her, and she's taking the call.
And then you're reporting that interview back, or her success in that interview, in your mind, back to the group involving Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and Matt McCabe. Isn't that what you're doing?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
I absolutely not. That is not how it went. I was horrified because Carrie's a blunt person, not like me. And she had made a comment about Miss Reed and Mr. O'Keefe's relationship. And I was shocked and horrified that she said it the way that she did.
You're so shocked and horrified that
I said, oh my God, she's telling them everything. Yes.
you decided it was so important that you needed to report that back to Brian Albert and his friends. His family.
I was horrified.
So you reported that back.
Yes, I said she told them everything.
Did you catch that pulse check?
When you were first confronted with these messages at a separate proceeding in June of 2023, you claimed that you couldn't remember what that exchange was about, correct?
Correct.
And now you just all of a sudden have this newfound memory of exactly what that text message was referring to, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yes, because Carrie Roberts said a statement and it jogged. I said, oh my God, that's what I meant when I said she said everything.
When did she say this statement?
Probably in the fall. She has made this statement a few times in reference to Karen.
You and Carrie Roberts are still coordinating your statements together.
Oh no, we're not. It's just an opinion she has of Miss Reed.
And all of a sudden that became your, quote, everything, all this stuff.
It didn't just become it. I forgot that I had written it, and one day Carrie made the statement, and I'm sure it happens to everyone. You forget something and then you're like, oh my God, that's what it was.
I'm not sure that happens to everyone.
Objection.
I'm not sure if that happens to everyone. Of course, that's going to be sustained.
Sustained.
Let me ask you a different question. When you were asked under oath a year ago, when things were fresher in your mind, you were asked specifically what you were referring to, and your answer was, "I have no idea." Correct?
Correct.
Because you didn't want to tell them that you had coordinated your statement with Carrie Roberts. Isn't that right?
No, that is not right. I did not remember what it was.
Went on to be asked specifically, do you know who you were referring to? And you said, maybe Carrie, maybe. I'm talking to Carrie. And the question was, but you don't recall this text? And your answer was, I don't remember. That's what you testified to a year ago, correct?
Correct.
But now you're talking about some memory of a disparaging comment that Carrie Roberts has about my client. And that's the everything in your mind.
Yes, the things that she was saying.
Quite obviously, what you were referring to in that text in real time, Ms. McCabe, was that Carrie Roberts was telling the police, quote, everything that you had laid out for her in this timeline meeting you had with her, correct?
Objection.
So it's sustained as to that form. You can ask that question in a proper way.
The everything you referred to in that text in real time was what you had worked out with Carrie in that timeline meeting, wasn't it? That was the everything you were referring to, correct?
Incorrect. We never worked together to come up with a story. We have the facts, and the everything was a comment about your client.
You went on in your group chat with Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and Matt McCabe to give running updates about whether or not Carrie Roberts was actually following the script, correct?
Incorrect. There was no script.
167. Matt McCabe texted the group, Brian, comma, sitting separate, end quote, correct?
Yes.
It sounds like Matt McCabe is reporting back to Brian Albert, following your instructions, we're sitting separately.
Objection.
Sustained.
One minute later, Brian Albert had a one-word response to the Brian sitting separate, correct?
Yes.
What was that one-word response?
Okay.
So it sounded like he was giving his approval for where people were situated in that meeting, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Again, the answer doesn't matter. The question has been asked. I wanted to thank you all for joining me. I hope you all enjoyed this, another installment of Jennifer McCabe, the puppet master of the Canton cover-up, cross-examination by Alan Jackson. And I will see you all tomorrow at 6 p.m. Unless tomorrow is a court day, in which case I'll see you at 9 a.m. Eastern times, of course. Bye, everybody.